Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, real, and in real time and live, as you can just see. Live and in real time was what I was trying to say there. This conversation, as with all of our Lunch Update programs, is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie. So many thank yous to Perkins Coie Law Firm. We'd also like to thank our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly, and our small and emerging business sponsor, Easy Office Products. As always, we record these, and if you would like to go back and revisit something, certainly share something, we would not only hope that you do, but appreciate that you do. We get a lot of viewership on the day of, but even more after the fact. And so please look for that later this afternoon on madisonbiz.com. Coming up, we'll be joined by our County Executive, Joe Parisi, for a conversation on issues that are important to Dane County businesses and our regional economy. But first, I have a few chamber updates for you. A total of 814 business and community leaders filled the floor of the Quill Center for our 9th annual Icebreaker last week, making it the largest crowd in the history of the event. We kicked off a conversation about what does it mean to belong. And we were fortunate to welcome and learn from two incredible speakers and subject matter experts on that subject of belonging. Dr. Faisal Abdullah shared his story of growing up in London as a Jamaican-born immigrant, and then how, or his parents were Jamaican-born immigrants, and then how that and other formative experiences led to a career in what is considered a groundbreaking, award-winning contemporary art expertise. And then social media influencer and entrepreneur Aidan Dowling shared his journey and the opportunities to connect with his work in uplifting and supporting transgender people around the world. If you're not familiar with Aidan, although he has more than 500,000 followers across all social media platforms, my guess if any Gen Z viewers are with us today, they probably have heard of him. He is the first transgender man to appear on the front cover of Men's Health magazine. Both Faisal and Aidan are more than just thought leaders. They're also invested in our local economy. Faisal is a professor at the university and just had a large art show at Momoka, and Aidan is building a startup called Trace right here in Madison. Both speakers talked about space and both others making space for them, but them making space for others. And I think it's something for us to all think about as we continue to pursue helping this region reach its full economic potential. With the nation's lowest unemployment, statistically at 1.9% last month, and then 3 months before that, we have held the title of the county with the nation's lowest unemployment. Growing our workforce is an imperative at this point. Most of the time, we view making space as something that's subtractive, that if I give someone space, I must be giving up my space, but it's actually completely the inverse. When it comes to the economy, making space for people is additive because it brings more people in and creates a stronger bond through a sense of belonging. I did say at the end of my speech, and I'll say it here again for those of you who were not there, or maybe it's important to hear it again, is there's one thing that's clear where we are in this moment in this region, is that we need to move from a certainty of this is who we are to a curiosity of who are we. There's a lot to continue to unpack and discuss around belonging. We hope to be part of decoding what that means and then implementing a stronger sense of belonging across all demographics here as we move towards the future of our economy and the future of our workforce. The conversation at Icebreaker was just the beginning, but there are ways that you can continue to have the conversation with us and with each other, and ways that you can help by sharing answers to this question: what makes a community feel like home? So what makes a community feel like home? There'll be a link in the chat where you can go and you can input your answers. There you see it. If you just go there, type in what your answer is to that. We are recording this across hundreds, if not thousands, of business people around the region, and we'll be rolling out that in the fall to reveal what we as a community think. With that said, it's my pleasure and enthusiasm to welcome our guest today, Joe Parisi, who has served as Dane County Executive for 12 years. He is certainly a name we all know. He previously served 6 years as one of our representatives in the state assembly, and then 8 years as the Dane County clerk before that. Joe attended Madison College, but then it was MATC. He graduated from UW-Madison with a degree in sociology. He is a lifelong resident of Dane County, and he and his wife, Erin, have raised their two wonderful daughters here on Madison's East Side. With that, County Executive Parisi, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thanks, Zach. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Maybe let's start with, let's go federal and then we'll end local. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Inflation Reduction Act. I don't know that everybody knows exactly what it is, but for those of you who maybe have heard it, it was a large piece of federal legislation, but there were some pretty important pieces of that were important for business before, yet remain important for business. And one of them that I know your team is working on is around certain incentives that would be localized in Dane County to make energy efficiency improvements. So there's a lot of money that helps businesses make these improvements and turn the corner on energy efficiency. Can you walk us through sort of where you're at the county in your role, but also what is your team tracking today? And then as specific as you can get to on a Zoom call, what resources are you seeing that are available that you want to highlight for employers?
Yeah, thanks. The Inflation Reduction Act is probably the name of it doesn't necessarily fit a lot of what we're focused on right now, but not in the traditional sense, but it does when it comes to your energy bills. When it certainly goes a long ways toward using renewable energy and being more energy efficient and saving a lot of money on those energy bills. Within reach of everyone, businesses, nonprofits, homeowners, et cetera. It's a pretty historic piece of legislation. As you mentioned, Zach, in Dane County, we've been working first on walking the walk when it comes to energy efficiency and renewables. Just a quick overview of kind of where we're at, and then which has led up to where we're at in Dane County and what has led up to our work, working with the IRA right now. A good 10 years ago, we partnered with the university and we asked them, how will climate change impact us locally and what do we need to know? Because we're all familiar with the forest fires out west, with hurricanes, et cetera, all of the national and international impacts. But as a local unit of government, what do we have to be ready for? And what came back was basically what we've been seeing in the last few years, really. They said we're going to see warmer and wetter weather. We're going to see many more heavy rain events like we saw in 2018 with all of the rain coming down at once, more flooding events. We're going to see more 90+ degree days. Our winters are going to be warmer, so we're going to see warmer. We're going to see thawing, freezing. So different things that we're going to have to deal with. So what we did is took this information to our local department heads and said, okay, how is this going to impact our highway department? How is this going to impact public health? How is this going to impact public safety? And everyone has had to kind of adjust moving forward based on that. Our highway department is doing different engineering for certain projects now because of the type of flooding that we see that we didn't see before. Our public health department is dealing with some types of diseases we didn't see before, especially insect-borne diseases. And on down the line, our lakes department, land and water resources. The flooding impacts our lakes work. And if we have time later, I could go into that a little more. So first we looked at adaptation, right? And there are various businesses that are probably on the call today that are having to look at how am I going to have to adapt some of my operations. Then we decided to look internally and say, okay, we're not the federal government, we're not the state government, but we do have a role to play right here at home in prevention, in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So we set a goal that by 2025, we would offset 100% of county government electricity use with renewables. We started by investing in efficiency, which is the fastest ROI, usually a couple of years, and you're saving a whole bunch of money. We put a couple $1 million a year in for a number of years. And then we started investing in renewables. And, over the last 10 years, now we're up to 17 different renewables facilities, solar facilities, be they on rooftops, or, for example, our partnership with MG&E out at the Dane County Airport, which was a wonderful example of public-private partnership. We are leasing land to MG&E. They constructed that solar field that folks have seen out by the airport on 40 acres. They made the investment up front. The taxpayers didn't make the investment up front. We promised to buy all the electricity from them. That offsets 40%, that project alone, of Dane County government's electricity use. And we save over $100,000 a year on our bill now because of the cost of coming down of solar energy. So it was a good deal for MG&E, a good deal for the taxpayers. And then just yesterday, we flipped the switch on our latest solar field, a 33,000 panel field out by our landfill in partnership with Alliant Energy. And with that, we are now 100% renewable offset. It's been a great example. You know, as you know, Zach, we convened people a number of years ago to put together what we called our climate action plan. And again, we're not a command and control form of government. We depend on partnerships and the art of possible. And so we brought everyone together, the business community, environmental advocates, the utilities, the university, community-based organizations, to come up with a plan to reach our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions countywide. And so we've done this internally now. Folks know about our, probably, maybe not, about our facility out at the landfill, where we invested about $28 million to create a facility that extracts the methane gas that our landfill creates, cleans it and compresses it. And we use that natural gas to fuel county vehicles. We're up to about half of those big orange trucks that plow the highways that you see running on compressed natural gas from the landfill. It's the cleanest transportation fuel around. It displaces dirty diesel fuel, and it costs us the equivalent of about $1.50 a gallon. So we're saving taxpayer dollars, cleaning the air. We sell the rest of that gas to Quick Trip, and they sell it as renewable compressed natural gas. We earn the taxpayers several million dollars annually through that process. So that brings us to this place we're at that's so exciting. And then maybe this is a good segue for talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, where, you know, we've kind of blown up that model of, well, you know, I'd like to do the right thing for the environment, but it's too expensive. I can't afford it. It just doesn't make sense fiscally. And that's now an antiquated model. We're showing just in the work we did, even before the Inflation Reduction Act, that we're saving taxpayer dollars, we're saving on our utility bills by using renewables. So it's not only the environmentally responsible thing, it's now the fiscally responsible thing to do. And so the IRA has in it incentives for businesses, local governments, nonprofits, so even you know churches, temples, homeowners, to get tax credits, not just deductions, but tax credits for renewables. So if you're installing, say, solar, just to get a real simple, example, if you have a factory and you're making widgets and you have a pretty high electric bill, you install solar that costs $30,000 to install, you get $10,000 back in tax credit, no questions asked. They cut you a check. So 30% of that project is paid for. There are also additional incentives for energy efficiency. You can get deductions for increased energy efficiency. And as exciting as that is, I think the piece that maybe I'm most excited about with the inflation, well, there are a couple of pieces I'm excited about, is that the incentives were designed so that if you are doing new construction, it is now cost competitive. And we have folks who are working with some businesses on some construction plans now who are telling us that it costs less with these incentives for the developments they're doing, the businesses they're working with, to go with clean energy than with fossil fuels. So you're building a new building and you're using geothermal to heat it and cool it with, you're using solar. Not only can you do that in many cases for less money than the old-fashioned way, but then you have greatly reduced or eliminated energy bills monthly too. So again, we've crossed that threshold now where we have to decide between the right thing to do, because now the question becomes, well, why aren't we using renewables? Because not only does it make sense for the planet, it makes sense for the bottom line. Right. And we have, the business community has been great. We have a program called Climate Champions, and there are probably some of our climate champions on the call today. And for other businesses that would like information about this, I believe Kathy from our Office of Energy and Climate Change has posted a link there, and it might be to the IRA. We can look later. We'll provide links for folks, because the bottom line is we want to act as a clearinghouse to partner with you and to help direct you toward resources. If you're interested, it's like, well, that sounds good, but where do I start? How do I do it? We want to help you with that. And we have a program through which we recognize local businesses who are taking that step in efficiency, renewables, demand side reduction for transportation, you name it. And we award you, there are different levels of a Climate Champion Award, because we think people should be recognized. And we think it's a great thing for you to be able to share with your customers, because folks certainly want to, do business, we see, with organizations that are doing their part for the environment. So we think you should be able to show that off if you are, and promote it, because we're proud of it. And we have a lot of climate champions right here. And as you know, folks in Dane County want us to be doing this work. That's certainly why county government's been able to do it. We have the most per capita electric vehicles in the state. We have the most per capita solar roof installations. And so, again, what I was saying, the exciting parts of this, it's the business, but it's also if you're a nonprofit owner or work at a nonprofit and you own your building, if you attend a church or a temple, those nonprofits in the past were not eligible for the incentives, for the rebates, but they are now. So we work with faith communities. We have a number of churches and temples who are installing solar, who are doing energy efficiency, and we help walk people through that. And we convene people to share information. We do that with local governments. For example, McFarland is building a new public safety building, and it's going to be the first net zero public safety building in the state. So there's money to be saved. There's a lot of help for the environment, and there are a lot of ways to do it. I think maybe the final piece of this I'll say is, as we start layering these programs together, if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act and the incentives that are available there, there are also things like the PACE program, where you can get financing on your building. It's Property Assessed Clean Energy, it's called. And I know one community bank, and there might be others who do these kinds of loans. You can get a loan with no money out of pocket. You can get this financing, so you can do the solar, no money out of pocket, the way it's structured. And then you can size your payment to the cost savings you're getting. So say you're going to save $500 a month, you might want to size your payment to $500 or $450 or $400 and even start saving. And then once it's paid off, of course, you own it, and that saving goes on forever. So the message we're trying to get across, again, is there are lots of new opportunities out there for us all to do our part. When it comes to addressing the climate change crisis, because it is a crisis. And this is our message is this helps empower us to do something about it. Sometimes it seems so big, the federal government, the international government, it can be international government, the international governments that come together, of course, sometimes it can seem overwhelming. But what we've been able to show in Dane County is you can get a lot done here, and then we become models for other folks. We're becoming models for other units of government. Our local businesses, our local schools, our local religious organizations become models for their peers throughout the state and throughout the nation. So maybe I'll just pause there. Again, Kathy's been putting some links in the chat. We're very anxious and open and willing to helping people achieve whatever goals you would like to attain.
Yeah, I appreciate that overview. A couple things I want to go back on just to either highlight or just to get your take on. One, hopefully we don't become part of the internet conspiracy theory that, you just admitted that there's some international.
I know, I said international government. Isn't that great?
We're gonna be a TikTok meme now.
It's the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So I know it's great.
I want to go all the way back though and just highlight. I believe the announcement that you made here on the, on the heels or on the sort of almost eve of Earth Day is, I think, by being 100% renewable for county buildings. Aren't you one of the first, like top 5? Aren't we the first 5 counties in the country to do this?
Yeah, it's really exciting. We're the first in Wisconsin, and we're the 4th in the nation. Wow. So, this really is a testament, to the folks who have been working on this. I get to talk about it. I get to promote it, but the county staff that has put hours and hours and hours into permits and meetings and figuring out deals and figuring out, because everything is structured differently. It's really a testament to their commitment. So yeah, we're pretty proud.
Good. You should be. I think we're proud as well. I do want to say for the businesses that are on, or the organizations that do own buildings, particularly larger buildings, and you're in the city of Madison, with some of the new rules and regulations that are going to come into effect in the next couple of years, these incentives could be a good way to start to hedge against some of the mandates that are coming. And so make sure you're reaching out to Kathy and clicking that link, talking to County Executive Parisi's office. Certainly appreciate that you have shifted the internal resources from how do we get as much for the taxpayers and for the county, and now using that same energy to say, look, what can we get the organizations and the community? So thank you for that. I also want to say it was certainly not lost on me that you said the word partnership multiple times during your description of what it is. And it's something that we have seen from the county, that you do believe partnership is how you build the sustainable future. It's how true sustainability. You said it, and it's true that this is something that the residents want you to work on. This is what the businesses want us working on, that climate change is one of those silly places for any of us to be fighting, because we all agree. We may disagree on pace and how we get there, but we all agree we need to get there. So I appreciate that you don't just say partnership, that you actually live it, and everything you just described is a good example of that too. Also part of that, you talked about the county's resiliency, right? The things that we have to be careful of. I mean, we are in a very good position. I mean, by most research, we are in a prime position to be one of the most resilient places in the country for climate change. We're not, we're not going to have parts of our community eroded away by oceans, right? But we do have to be careful, as you noted, about rising levels and flooding, freezing and thawing, and more rain days than where we used to have snow days. But then growth obviously has a piece of that too. And I know it's something you're tracking, we're tracking, but Dane County's population growth certainly has not slowed down and even accelerated into and out of the pandemic. We know that particularly for young people that are driving most of the in-migration, we're number 9 in the country now for Gen Z net migration. So when you look at just how many people left or how many people came in, we're 9 in the country. I think we're the only city in the Midwest. Because of that in-migration in Dane County, Wisconsin now leads the Midwest in Gen Z in-migration, and 55% of that in-migration are not students. These are young professionals starting their career. I mean, I can't imagine the last time we were able to say Wisconsin leads the Midwest in young people attraction, but 85% of that demographic is coming to Dane County. I mean, it's helping the story. Wisconsin's story is our story, but Dane County is driving the Midwest growth when it comes to Gen Z recruitment. And then because of that, as you might expect, Madison now leads, based on LinkedIn data, Gen Z hiring. Gen Z gets hired here at a higher percentage of anywhere else in the country. Austin's right behind us. But another, I think, flag to sort of prove what's happening here. There's obviously benefits to it. And so here's sort of my question is, there's risk and reward when you have growth like that. I think we're not out of control growth, and I think we are handling growth correctly. But I'm curious as to what are the things that you're seeing regarding Dane County's growth, and specifically from a county standpoint, what are the things that you're focusing on as Dane County continues to see this exceptional new opportunity to attract young people?
Yeah, it's in an overall sense, Zach, it's working to maintain what we believe is the piece that we have some input over of the overall situation that does make us attractive to people to want to live and work here. And this comes back to kind of what you were talking about before. When I see the overall dynamic in place, it's because of everyone on this Zoom, right? I mean, it's the business community. It's because of the opportunity that exists here. It's, in my view, a big part of it is because of the inclusiveness that was exemplified by your opening remarks today, right? Everyone is welcome here. And it's our quality of life, of which that is a part. And, Dane County, one of the things that attracts people here is our quality of life. It's our lakes, it's our parks, It's our relatively low rate of crime. There's so many pieces to this. It's the fact that a young person can get on their bike downtown and be out in the country in 20 minutes, mostly off road, on bike paths. So we focus on quality of life, be it, our extensive lakes cleanup efforts, our investments in our parks, it's our partnerships with our businesses. And I think that, one of the things that perhaps concerns me the most, when you were mentioning, the influx of Gen Z, of folks choosing to live here and choosing to stay here when they grow up here. Recently there was a statewide discussion in the legislature about, well, how do we attract young people here? And one person floated the idea of, well, maybe a flat tax. And for me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the way you attract young people and help young people stay is by being welcoming to young people and by reflecting the values they want to see. These folks, as you know, can live anywhere in the country and now beyond. Right, digital nomads, et cetera, and we're coming to a point where there's going to have to be a reckoning with the rest of the state, and particularly the state legislature and Dane County, and that's where I think it's key that because of some of the messages that do get sent statewide by the legislature. If you're a Gen Z person living in California and you see some of that stuff and that's all you know about Wisconsin, you're going to be, well, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, no, thank you. I want to live in Seattle or New York. But when people get to know what we're like in Dane County, that's really important. The opportunity, our openness, our accepting of everyone. And so I think I see a difference. As you mentioned, I served in the state legislature. And I certainly see a difference between my local business community, folks on this call, and how the business community is represented at the state level. And I think this is kind of a call to action and an opportunity for our local business community to assert the influence that you do have and assert your voice on the state level and say, look business isn't just this or this. Some of the representations we see maybe from some of the statewide organizations that show up. This is what works in Dane County, and we don't have to be fighting with everyone all the time. There's a lot of good we can do through collaborating and, and instead of just pointing out what's bad and what we don't like, let's work on the things that make Dane County such a special place, because we'd love if the rest of the state could, benefit from this as well.
Absolutely. Another side of this too, that, since we sort of opened the door a little bit into sort of some of the partisan divide within the state, it is another byproduct of Dane County's growth, and that's the impact on statewide elections. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything because of the way maps are structured on individual districts, but statewide, you can see the outcomes and how they've been trending over the last 3 or so elections. So, we're seeing record voter turnout in Dane County. Something that we're all proud of. You as a former clerk, but as a county exec, we're all proud of that, right? More people voting, more people having opportunity to vote and access to voting is good for democracy. And I'm certainly, I know our organization is very proud of the turnout that we see in Dane County. But there's also, it's also yielding a high margin of victory for Democrats. So we're seeing that on statewide elections, that where the state may be purple, and the margins may not be huge statewide, the margin differential in Dane County is the difference maker when it comes to statewide elections. We saw it in the most recently in the Supreme Court race, where Justice Parisi won Dane County at 82% of the vote, which was a 64% voter differential. I try to put that in context to people that, Cook County in Illinois, people think is like the bastion of blue. And, J.B. Pritzker, won that by like 48% differential. And here we saw a 64%, which was a 6% increase over Evers Michael's race and a 12% differential increase over Biden Trump. So you can see that ignoring Dane County, or worse, attacking Dane County, or attacking the things that Dane County residents hold dear, doesn't yield statewide election results. I know we both agree on that, so I won't say you agree, but I can see your head nodding. But I guess I'm curious as to what you think the future of that might be. does this mean that it's possible that your former colleagues in the legislature, particularly on the right side of the aisle, see leaning into Dane County and Madison as an opportunity if they maybe do what you said and find the places where we actually have commonality and agreement and reach across and say, how do we help, and then learn from what is helping our whole state, have this new position as number one in the Midwest for recruiting young people. So what's your hope or thought on what could happen as politics, which is interesting. The thing that divides us maybe could bring us together. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think several. It's such an interesting topic. I think, first of all, to echo a little bit of what I said a minute ago, just in a different kind of angle, I do think in this realm too, this is an opportunity to greatly empower our local businesses' voice, our local chamber, because you speak the same language that a lot of the folks on the Republican side of the ticket espouse, but do they always listen to what you're saying? It's because it's much more complicated than jobs. We support jobs. I mean, what does that mean, right? And how do you support jobs? So I think the opportunity for your voice to be heard is much greater. And I think it's kind of bifurcated. So as long as we have the gerrymandering, frankly, that we do, and that's not like rhetoric, it's nationally recognized. When you look at our voter numbers and then the makeup of the legislature, it just doesn't sync, right? I think we'll have, in the business community even, we'll have a hard time with getting the legislature to respond unless there's some kind of redistricting decision at the Supreme Court that makes it a little more 50-50 and a little more fair, because folks play to their district, right? And if their district, it's really easy to have throwaway lines, unfortunately, trashing Dane County and trying to pigeonhole Dane County as this or that. Now, I think what you're referring to is on a statewide level. And there is where the real opportunity, in my opinion, exists, because as you stated, that people who want to win statewide, even if they're on the Republican side, even if they're not going to carry Dane County, they have to do better than Dane County than they have in Dane County. They have to make some inroads. They have to listen to folks in Dane County who might be, open to hearing what they're saying. And so, again, I think the business community, our local business community's influence can only grow. I don't see, especially with this change that we're seeing continuing, where we're going to overtake. I mean, you and I were talking like a few weeks ago, weren't you saying like we're going to overtake Milwaukee as far as numbers in voting in the near future? So I think it's an opportunity for the business community to assert itself and say, no, this is what Dane County is. This is what works for us, and this is what you need to take into consideration. And this is what you're doing that damages us, right? I mean, you referred to the Supreme Court race, and without getting into, I mean, everyone has their own views on the choice issue, for example, but that's what really drove that race, and that was for so many of the numbers. And that's another one of those issues that if we're looking at folks who are Gen Z and they're looking at, if you're a young woman who's living somewhere in the country and you're looking at where you're going to live and you look at Wisconsin and say abortion's illegal, that doesn't sound like a very welcoming state. Those are the kind of things that people look at, and that's the reality of what impacts, maintaining and attracting young people.
I agree. I appreciate you saying. I want to give kudos on something else to you, but also to acknowledge, during the pandemic, you and I didn't always agree, or our organizations and county government didn't always agree. But I think, as you talked earlier about, finding that common thread and finding ways to disagree without being disagreeable, I think is sort of an example of, even when you and I or our organizations were most frustrated during the pandemic, we still have these moments where we look for what binds us together versus what we divided us for. And so I hope that what you're sort of putting out there is heard, both by the business leaders, that we need to assert more influence statewide, and from leaders, from outside of the area, of saying they may disagree with things that we do. They may not like our politics. They may, there may be plenty of things they disagree with, but the outcome is what's important, and what you do next is even more important. And so but speaking of the pandemic, I remember it was a late night, you called and you said, this is pre any money from the feds, pre any money from the state. you were just digging into your own sort of shallow pockets in the county and said, I think it went like this. I have about $3.5 million, which I know is not a lot, but I know businesses are hurting. So what's your recommendation? And we talked about childcare as, one of the things to do. And to your credit, rapidly, quickly, you put $3.5 million out in a stabilization fund. Childcare is not a big membership component for us, but absolutely foundationally important to the ability to keep our economy up and moving. So one, I want to appreciate, even when the resources weren't really there, you heard us, believed us, saw how you could help and did something about it. And so that is, I think, to me, one of the really bright spots. A lot of things that we can be proud of and how we handled the pandemic, but that one to me was something that just showed the collaboration. But I'm curious about childcare. I know you're passionate about it. I know there are places where your administration works in that space. We see a market failure there, right? We see that we need to raise prices so that we can create more capacity and we can pay teachers more. But we can't raise prices because it prices people out of an essential economic tool that allows them to participate fully in the economy. But it does feel like something we can wrap our hands around locally. And so I guess I'm curious as to, do you think there's a possibility or even the potential for a Dane County model or a Madison model that could become something national? And if so, where do you think that starts? What does it even what does the framework for something like that look like? How do we start to tackle this issue of childcare, and can we be a leader?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Yeah, this is one of the most important issues and one of the toughest nuts to crack too. I think when we look at kind of local solutions, because we know that, businesses only have so many resources, local units of government, we have limits on what we have. So there isn't a big pocket of money somewhere, but there are partnerships we had. I know Jack Daniels is leading a partnership in more of a, it's maybe not a county-wide model, but designed kind of like within regions of the county for, in that case, partnering MATC, local employers, nonprofits. How can they bring, resources kind of developed for the specific area in which they're in? But, the crux of this problem, does come back to the funding challenge. I mean, how do you hire someone to work for $15 an hour in childcare when you can't find people to work for $20 an hour at Quick Trip? And we just don't see, and this isn't like pushing off the problem on someone else, but just kind of my analysis of this. We just don't see the assistance that we really need from the larger units of government, like the federal government, like the state government. And I think this is, an example of one of those nuances that get lost in the discussions at the state capitol. It kind of brings us full circle to that discussion of is this the one of the many issues that our local chamber can create a coalition around and talk to people, of both parties, obviously, because this is another one of those issues. This shouldn't be partisan. Most people have children and most people have challenges with work and childcare, and especially, people who are trying to get out of poverty and find childcare. There are just too many things in the way. So unfortunately, I think that the greater solution, I'm obviously always open to ideas, has to involve those deeper discussions with our state officials. And again, it comes back to who will folks listen to. And I think it's like so many of our issues, be it transit, be it childcare, be it quality of life, the business community has to be invited into or insert itself into those conversations to say, hey, the issues that we care about are much more complex than the sound bites that we too often hear. And I don't know if that's a helpful answer, Zach, but it's kind of how I see any real lasting solution.
Yep. No, I appreciate it. Looking at time, and I got a couple more issues that I want to get through. So I'm going to try to maybe speed around a couple of things here.
Okay.
Workforce housing. Our analysis shows that during the pandemic, 1 out of every 4 new housing units in the state was done in Dane County. So, almost double, maybe even close to triple our population size. So,
yeah,
and we're leading it. Your administration started a regional stakeholder group recently around housing. What does that look like to you? And what are you hoping to accomplish with that new strategy?
Yeah, first of all, to get people talking, to get input, we have housing advocates, we have MABA, we have the realtors, we have everyone coming together to identify and other local units of government, because one of the bright spots we're seeing is that it used to be just kind of like a Madison focused conversation. And now we have suburbs, towns from all throughout the county being much more involved in developing workforce housing. So it's developing a strategy, it's identifying the challenges and the obstacles, coming up with proposed solutions. It's looking at, from our perspective, what we can do in the county. Again, another one of those things we can't solve by ourselves, but we have started over the last several years, something we weren't involved in before, and that's, working with affordable housing. We've invested $20 million, another 10 this year, in partnering with local developers to create more affordable housing and mixed levels within one unit of government. So, city and county government has to step up, local governments, and then identifying, are there certain zoning changes that just get in the way that aren't really doing, any good? Or, in some cases, well, maybe there's a reason they're in place. But setting those goals, understanding the program, and working together with everyone to develop strategies. Not an easy issue. It's a nationwide challenge, but, we have to talk about it and we have to share kind of our ideas in dealing with it.
All right. So another big question in a decreasing amount of time, transportation. Think back to Transport 2020. The county was largely sort of driving the conversation. Now it seems it's being more driven by municipalities, largely cities within Dane County. How do you see the county's role in transportation, and maybe even broadly, even outside your own domain? What do you think needs to happen for us to keep pace from a transportation standpoint?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think that some of the partnerships we're seeing between Madison and some of the surrounding communities are really important. We have a funding mechanism different, for example, than Milwaukee County. Here, the federal funds come into municipalities. So those partnerships, Madison, Sun Prairie, Madison, Middleton, I think we need to, the conversation about an RTA, a Regional Transportation Authority, has kind of gone by the ways because we never get permission from the legislature, but it comes back to there's no dedicated funding mechanism when we look at, coordinating and implementing transit, because we don't want to turn into Austin, right? And then it has to do with planning on how we develop to do it in the most, most transit friendly way and the most transportation friendly way.
One area of transportation that you have full control over is the airport. Certainly, I think we've all celebrated, you and I've done press conferences together and been proud of we doubled the number of direct destinations under your administration. So we had a lot of tailwind coming into 2020 and then all headwinds from the pandemic. Some of those are returning, which is exciting. Not all of them have like the SFO. I tell people, little did people know we were on the verge of announcing 2 flights to SFO on a daily basis. Now we're trying to get one back. But I'm curious, obviously a major construction project going on out there. What predictions do you offer for the next 12 months? What do you think that looks like from those?
Yeah, so, it's my hope, I'm an optimist. I think we're going to be able to continue adding. We're certainly focused on the SFO and other areas, getting back what we had. We're starting to get it. 'Cause you're right, we were in such a good place. I see with our new terminal expansion and opening, our airport becoming even more pleasant. I mean, we have a great reputation as a place to fly in and out of. We're growing to accommodate that. We're hiring a new new flight coordinator. The exact name of the position eludes me right now, to focus on continuing to develop those relationships and add flights. So I see the trajectory to continue. Certainly leisure travel is off the charts, and business travel is still a little bit of an unknown to see how the new world of Zoom, is going to pan out, but we're seeing that increase also.
Yep. We have about a minute and a half left. Tonight's county board meeting, very high profile issue on the agenda, the jail, which is something, we've been trying to do as a community collaboratively for a while. It seems like maybe the county board has come to an agreement. What do you think happens tonight, and what are the next steps?
Knock on wood, I think they're there. So that gets approved, I'm certainly ready to sign it. It'll go out to bid later this year, and then we can get moving, hopefully, by the end of the year, or a little later than that, on getting some shovels in the ground. It's a much needed facility, as folks know, and this is, a good compromise that they finally came to. So it's good to have it almost behind us.
Great. Well, everyone, County Exec Joe Parisi. Joe, thanks for being with us today. Thanks for the wealth of information. Thanks for the work that you're doing to make sure that these incentives get in the hands of businesses and other organizations. Certainly appreciated and noted. Appreciate the partnership. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. A reminder that this is recorded and you can see it, and certainly share out the recordings to others. And as always, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie. I wish everyone a wonderful day.